to Delmarvalous Festival.
My name is Kathy Beauchesne, and I run the Center for Research in Basketry. And since 2012, which I think is when I first met Rhonda and her mother, we have been doing research on Maryland basketry, both on the Eastern Shore and also in the mountains on Western Maryland and also in Southern Maryland. So we've done a series of about 6 different projects over the past 3 years, and we've done symposiums with each one. And so on the Eastern Shore, when I met Rhonda, we were talking about eel pots, and which are really traps. And so Rhonda was really instrumental. Rhonda knows everything, I just have to say that. Right. She's very well connected on the Eastern Shore, and so she and her mom did interviews for me, and throughout the last 5 years I've collected interviews, and we videotaped all of our events and symposiums that we've had. And we also decided that a lot of baskets were in people's homes, so at the same time we did our symposiums and our exhibits of basketry, we also ran an antique basket roadshow. And we had Lou Larison come in, and people would bring in their baskets to be appraised, and we would document all of them. And so we've probably documented 500 or so baskets in the state of Maryland that are in people's homes, so we know the owners and where they come from. So the project is really the information that we've gathered, the research that we've done, the documentation that we've done, the interviews, and also the videos, and all of the work that all of our tradition bearers have done, like Rhonda and her mother, which has just been absolutely key to everything that we've done. And so this is our brochure, and on the back are many of the museums and organizations that we've collaborated with over time. When I first started out, I worked with the Maryland State Arts Council, and they gave me 4 names. And so by now I think we probably I have a mailing list of about 300 or 400 people that have participated in the project over time. So what I wanted to say first is that this is the basket that got me started. And this is an oak basket. It's an apple basket from Ohio. And my grandfather died 35 years ago. I was pregnant with my son. And as I was leaving and we were coming home, I saw this basket on the steps of his basement, and so I picked it up, and this is my one thing that I have from, well, I also have his kitchen table, but this is the one thing that really got me started on baskets. And this is a very beautifully made basket, and it's made out of oak, and if you will look, it has a rim around the bottom, which is to protect the bottom. And everything in it is hand done, so the handle is hand carved, all the oak was prepared by hand. And it is a very gorgeous basket, and I'm happy to pass it around if anybody would like to see it. But it is a round basket. And I brought a couple of other examples before we get into eel pots, because I wanted people to kind of understand just a little bit about the difference. So I don't know, do you want to see this basket?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to.
How old is that basket?
It's an Ohio basket, and my grandfather was born and raised in Ohio in a particular county, and so my guess is it's well over 100 years old. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, but some of the eel pots I think you have are the same.
Yeah, they are.
So there's a couple other things I just wanted to say about baskets. They're great fun to make. You don't need too many tools, all right? You need scissors, all right? You need basket reed. You need a spray bottle and water, because we always work wet. You know, you can't work dry. And then these little tools, of which there are many sizes, these are called packers, and they're real good for getting under difficult spots and, you know, making the reed go in the way you want it to. And then there's a couple types of baskets that I just wanted to talk about. This is another round one that was made by a member of the Chesapeake Basketry Guild. And so most of the baskets that you'll see are made with staves that go straight up and down on all sides. And so the eel pot is very similar in that the staves go straight up and down. And those of you that saw me weaving, what I'm doing and what Rhonda and her mother are doing are exactly the same. And so we're using the same material. We're using the rattan plant. And I'm using the bark, so I'm using the cane from the rattan plant, and they're using the inside. And the rattan plant is grown in Indonesia, and it comes in great big long strings. So you saw big long strings out there where Rhonda was weaving and I was weaving, and this this is the cane part of it, and that's the inside part of it. And so it's grown in Indonesia. It's the bark is stripped off. It has thorns on the outside, so all that's stripped, and then it's sent to China and cut in about 10 different sizes. So you will see reed that is this thin. You'll see reed that's round on the bottom. All of it's cut in different sizes. This is a very thin round reed, and this looks like about 3/8 here, but it goes all the way from 1/8 inch all the way up to 1 inch wide. And so anyway, so this is how it comes, and when it comes from China, it comes over in a boat. It used to be that basket makers would go into the countryside, and that's what Rhonda's family has done, and also eel pot makers on the eastern shore have gone into the woods and cut down oak trees. The Day Basket Factory, which is one of the areas that we worked with, one of the factories that we worked with uses an oak tree that is cut for them. The problem being that you have to go in, basket makers have had to go farther and farther into the woods to get the tree that they want. So in an oak basket, all right, what you need is an oak tree that's straight up and down, about 8 inches around, all right, and it goes straight up and down with no knots. And then you cut an 8-foot piece right out of the center of it. And then you hope and cross your fingers that you're going to have enough reed to make an oak basket that it's not going to have the grain that's going to be curvy or anything like that. So, using those kinds of, using that kind of method certainly ruins a lot of oak trees, and so that's why basket makers had to go in farther and farther. So mostly now we use this, and it's easily dyed, and you can make it with colors, and you can do all kinds of other things. And so anyway, so this is a different construction. And we did this on we learned about this kind of basket when we went to the mountains because it's closer to West Virginia, and so Western Maryland is really very close to West Virginia. This is an egg basket, and it's a different kind of construction. So it's a rib basket, and the ribs go around this way and around this way, and you want it to, there's an egg in it, so you want it to sit perfectly, all right? And this one does, thank God, all right? And so you want it to sit perfectly, and so farmers would use it to sort eggs, and there are actually, it can have 4 pockets on it, so you can have 4 pockets and sort different sizes, but this is a traditional egg basket, and you find a lot of this kind of weaving in West Virginia and also in the mountains of Western Maryland. And then lastly, I just wanted to share the last 2. This is a basket that's made of cane and cherry wood, and this is the Nantucket style of the kind that I'm making outside, and it has an ivory plug in the middle, and it was made by Nantucket lightship basket makers who lighted the way into the Nantucket harbor. The seamen were on the boats for like 9 months of the year. And they, at that time in the 1800s, cane was very popular, and it was shipped in from China. So they had cane on the boat, and then they rolled their provisions onto the boat in barrels. And so they used the barrels to make this very unusual kind of basket with a wooden base. And then they used to use baleen from whales because it was a big whaling industry up there in New England, and they would weave a piece of baleen into the baskets. And those baskets today that were made by those sailors are worth tens of thousands of dollars. And then the last one, just real quickly, this is a twill, all right, and it is a double-walled basket, so you can see the inside, which is twilled, and you can see it on the bottom, okay? And then the inside is woven first, and then you weave, you turn the basket upside down, and then you weave the outside. And then you finish it, and then you finish the rim. And so this has seagrass in it. And so one of the things I think is very important when you're looking at baskets is, that, like this is lots and lots of rows, okay? And this doesn't have as many rows, because the reed is like 3/8 of an inch wide, or maybe even a half. And then a basket like this, again, has lots and lots of rows. And so the price of baskets depends on, the size, and then also the amount of work that goes into them. And so a basket like this, there's a lot of weaving that goes into it. The handle's decorated and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, so that's a quick summary of baskets. We didn't cover the coil baskets or other kinds of baskets that they're around, but there is a coil basket out in the one of the Native American exhibits that was made by, oh God, I forgot his name, but he makes a gorgeous basket, and so there is a coil basket out there. And then these baskets are very, very special, and I think they're just gorgeous, and the museum actually does own one, and I think, you know, one of the things we learned about Maryland baskets is that many of them are very functional, and they were used in daily life. And so the eel pot baskets were used in, you know, in waterman life, and they were important in catching eels. And Rhonda and Nellie are going to talk a little bit about it, and they can talk about the Milton Dean basket at the end, of which the museum has one also. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Rhonda and her mother. They lived on Hooper's Island. They knew Milton Dean, and they knew his family, and they have some wonderful stories to tell. So I will hand it over to you guys.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On Hooper's Island, there's the crab houses and there's the waterman, and everything revolved around the water business on Hooper's Island, because it was like Smith Island and places like that, Tangier. It was so everybody, either the women worked in the crab houses or all the men worked watermen. And Mr. Dean lived right up the road from us, and he was one of the last eel pot makers on Hooper's Island, and he died in 1974. He had I think he had 5 children,
Mm-hmm.
and his youngest son, Mickey, was the youngest, and he was the one that followed his footsteps and did some work on the water with his father. But the rest of them moved away, and Mickey was the only one that was actually left. And he actually did make the eel pots with his father, and actually maybe not use this type of eel pot to catch eels, but a wire eel pot. When wire was developed in the late 50s, early 60s, then all of these just became obsolete. They were just all tossed away or put in sheds out back, and nobody actually used them anymore. What the watermen would do then is they would, in the springtime, these wooden ones, they would take them out to the creek and just dump them out in the creek. And when white oak is put into water for any length of time, it absorbs the water, and then there's no play in the basket. When the basket dries out, there's a little bit of play with the reeds. They'll move around, but when you put it in the water, it soaks up all that water, and it just makes the basket really tight. A lot of eels were caught in the 50s, the early years. They used them for trot line bait, but now my son does eeling. He's been eeling for probably 15 to 18 years on his own, and his eels he keeps alive. And what they do with them is they ship them to Japan, Holland, the Netherlands, Japan, China, and Holland. And they FedEx these eels overnight to these countries. So they're still alive when they get there. And, it's a big thing, the sushi and everything is much bigger in other countries than I think it is. It's growing here in the United States, but I think years ago it was used for bait to catch crabs, but you can't afford, at $3.50 a pound live, you can't afford to put them on trot line bait anymore to catch crabs. But Mickey's father was, the last one to make them, and this is one that he made probably, it could have been in the 60s or maybe early 70s. And what they did is they went to this little swamp in Golden Hill, is what his son told me, and they actually did the trees themselves. His father would select the trees, and they would cut the tree down, they would leave it a certain height, and I guess the biggest part of it, I'm not really for sure, but what they would do is they would take them home, and they would try to split them. And he said as soon as they would try to split them, they would know whether it would work or not. He said they would cut about 20 trees and maybe get to use maybe 9. if they split right, they'll split right, but if there's for some reason they split wrong, that you just have to throw it away. But he did tell me that his father, and you can tell how thick some of this wood is, they would let this white oak soak for 4 or 5 days before they could even, it was pliable enough to weave. And I would have never thought that this would have been a basket weaving. You know, I would have thought, I never thought of it as basket weaving, you know, until I met up with Kathy. But he did say that when they cut the tree down, they cut enough of it so that when he made the plug to go into the top of it, that it was from the same tree. So everything was from the exact same tree when they made them. But it was difficult when we started this project because, like Mr. Dean's family, his son Mickey and his daughter Millie, none of them knew what happened to the molds. And if you have a mold, it's a lot easier to do something like this. And all of Mr. Dean's look exactly alike. So you know he didn't weave them. He had to use a mold because they're all about the same size. They fluctuate maybe 1/2 inch, but they're all the same size and, you know, about the same width going around. But what they used back then, because Mickey told me it looked like it was an old telephone pole that they had found somewhere, and they had made the mold out of the telephone pole. So when they actually, you know, when he died and they got rid of some of the stuff, those were probably just burnt or put, not to the landfill, that probably in somebody's backyard or somewhere. Nobody actually knew what they were. And so and it took us more than a year when we started this project to get a mold made, because you don't know what your basket's going to look like until you get the mold made, and you have to kind of tweak it a little bit to do different things to it to make it look right. So that was one of the hardest parts.
It was.
We were more than a year actually getting it.
It was. It
off
took
the
a long
ground.
time. Rhonda knew Melvin Hickman, and
Right.
And he had made eel pots with his father in the 1940s when he was a teenager on the kitchen table.
From Hooper's Island.
From Hooper's
He's from
Island,
Hooper's
all right. And so he was really, you know, I interviewed him and he says, you know, I don't have anything to say to you. And then we talked for 2 hours and then he was hooked on these eel pots. And so anyway, so he kind of got the things, Rhonda had made the contact, and so he started working on, because we were using the Milton Dean eel pot as our model. And because it has such a unique shape, and I don't know how you all feel about it, but I think it's a gorgeous piece of work, all right? And, you know, and it's you know, basket making is so exciting because it's probably one of the most humble arts around, but at the same time, when you look at that and you look at the ones that everyone is making, they're beautiful, all right? And the eel pot is, I think, gorgeous. And if you look at the shape and the materials and all that kind of stuff, it's really a beautiful piece of art. And that's what Milton Dean did. So the other thing I should add is that once I made contact with Rhonda, we were able to get funding from the Maryland State Arts Council to do an eel pot project so that we would preserve this craft. And so Rhonda and her mother and her brother agreed to carry it on. And so Milton taught the class, all right? Melvin, the best way he could.
Right.
And, you know, from what he remembered, because we couldn't find anybody from that era who was still alive. And and then Rhonda and her family really worked to make molds and to make them as best we could, you know, using this model. And so we got the funding, and so we did, after about a year of research and all that kind of stuff, we did an eel pot class, all right, for several weeks, and each week we made one so that every single member of the family had one. And you know, and then we started making, and then Rhonda and her family really started going around to a lot of different events on the Eastern Shore as well as in Baltimore, and you know, and really talking about the eel pots and talking about how they're made. And so, and both Rhonda and Nellie know a lot about eels.
Right. Being from an island, you do.
Yeah, living on an island. And so, and I can remember, because when I grew up in the Chesapeake Bay, there were eels all over the place, but they're almost endangered at this point. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you know about eels.
My son does eeling. That's his big thing. he likes to go after the eels because with crabbing and with oystering, you have a time limit, you have an amount limit. They tell you when you can go to work, they tell you when you have to quit, and there's no limit. Not yet. And he can actually eel 7 days a week. The things that he does is eels and snapping turtles, and there's no real restrictions, a lot of really harsh restrictions on those two things. But he also does the turtle fikes and pound nets. We do those too, and it's a lot of hard work. But Justin does really, really well with the eels, and he keeps them live, and he sells them to a buyer in North Carolina, and they come and pick them up every 4 or 5 days. And they're used for food, but there are still a lot of eels down in the area where we live, because not a lot of people go after the eels. They go after the crab and the oyster.
Right.
So, but my son has made it work. He's 36 and he's made it work. So, and supports a family of 4. So, he's able to make it work.
Yeah, and he makes it work year round, which I think
Oh yeah,
is just
he
really
does
amazing.
summer and winter.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they do, you do the muskrat? And
We do it all.
So
When you
they
live
do
on an
it-
island, if you live near an island, and you know this is what you've got, you have to make it all work.
Right. So I do have to add that both Rhonda and her mother are champion eel, or not
Muskrat
muskrat skinners.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a 5-time world champ.
No, Rhonda's what, 5-time world champ, and
Yep.
Nellie, I saw pictures of you skinning them when you were like 3 years
10,
old.
she was 10.
She was 10,
She's-
okay, it's been a
Our
while.
national outdoor show is held every year in February,
Uh-huh,
and Mama was born in 1928, but she skinned in 1938
okay,
at the very first outdoor show
wow,
with her sister Edith and her little brother
right,
Arthur, who was 4.
uh-huh,
And they all got 50 cents for skinning. And it wasn't a competition for speed.
Right.
It was just to let the audience know that the trappers, like my grandfather and my uncles, that their children knew how to skin.
right,
And when Mom was little, everybody had to help because, it was part of what you had to do with large families. You had to do something
right,
with
right,
it. So.
exactly.
And that's why my brother and my nephew and my son and Nora, my cousin's little girl, and I, we all still participate in the outdoor
Right,
show.
right.
And it'll be our 73rd year.
Oh,
in
my
February.
goodness, wow.
All run by volunteers.
Yeah, it's just
So,
amazing.
It
Yeah.
is, and it still goes on. And we do
Uh-huh.
the demonstrations at the outdoor show,
Yeah,
different
and
places.
Tomato Festival and
Yeah.
a number of other places. One of the things that I found that I didn't know, then I learned it from Nellie and you, all right, was that when the men went out on the water in the morning, they took the kids with them.
Yes.
And maybe you can share a little bit about that, because you told me the story about one of your kids who didn't want to ride with his father in the boat, so he went off on his own. Is that the story that I heard? And is that the story I heard?
Yeah. My son always wanted a boat, but he always went with his father. But then one day he said he told his father he wanted a boat, so they went up and got one. It was just a little putt-putt, that's what we call it, boat with a motor in it. So he would just go right ahead and let him go. Well, he'd tow him out every morning.
He was about 10.
He
Yeah,
was
he was about 10, wasn't he?
About 10
10.
years old. So he would tow him out, and he'd say, "Okay, it's time for you to go." He'd go off, go wherever he wanted to go.
Yeah.
But he was always in sight. of where he
Dad
was
always
at.
kept him close to him.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let him
Always
go
kept
too
him
far.
close to him.
Because Bonnie and I stayed in the big boat with Dad, and he would
Yeah.
turn him loose. Because, once you feel like you know everything, and he thought he knew everything.
Right.
But, you have to learn from your mistakes. And Dad just he never argued with him. He just said, if you think you can do it, here. So, he had his own boat from 10 years
That's
old.
amazing.
Right
yeah.
on.
So the kids went out with their fathers, and moms did what?
I always pick crabs. The mothers always pick
Mom went to the
crabs.
crab house in the morning.
Uh-huh.
She went to work at 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. So she got up around 2. And then Dad would leave about 3:30, 4 o'clock with us, with 3 children under tow. Bonnie
boat.
Gay was probably 8, I was 6, and Mark Jr. was 4. It's Bonnie Gay was my cousin, because it was just 2 of us. But she was a redhead too, so he took all 3 of us kids out on the boat 6 days a week.
6 days a week, right?
Because Mom worked in the crab house 6 days a week. But it worked,
Yeah.
you know. We knew how hard our parents had to work, because we were right there in the heat.
And I think it's a very important thing to recognize that, you know, that the Waterman culture was very much built around family and, you know, and really quite different from, you know, farm families, for
Exactly.
instance, you know, where kids worked with their parents on the land, you know, in the Waterman families, the kids went with their dads on the boats, and at whatever age, right? How old were
Right.
they when they went on the boats?
My son was 2 when he started.
Yeah.
I put him on the boat with his father because in the summertime I knew where he was at. He was not going to get in any trouble. He was on the boat, and that was it. And he would see how hard you had to work. So, you know, I thought that was important. But, you know, we all work hard to make it all work.
Right.
We still do.
And they still do, that's
Yeah, we
very
still
true.
do. And we still work with Justin, our son, and do, you know, whatever needs to be done. So it works.
And life
good.
has changed on Hooper's Island, I think, in many ways. And
Yes.
now Rhonda and her mom take care of properties that are really
We
summer properties
caretake.
and things like that on Hooper's Island. And so they do, I know, how many acres of grass did you cut last week on the heat?
I cut 15 yards of grass last week.
At 89 years old.
In the heat.
In the heat.
But I love it.
And then she fished crab floats in between all of it. The soft crabs are popping.
We have a 0 turn.
She's got 2 0 turns. When she tears one up, she gets on the other one. But the thing that really holds our island still together is our churches, our schools, and the fire department. I mean, we have that, and our school is off the island, but the fire department and the churches are on the island, and that's like the glue that holds our whole community together, because we all support every bit of it.
And we also have a restaurant down there, and we have a store.
A store. So it's not like Elliott's Island on Hooper's Island. You can get gas, you can get hot food, and a really nice restaurant, Old Salty's.
And it's
So-
good.
It's good, yeah.
How many people live on the island?
In the wintertime, it's probably 120, maybe 150, but in the summertime, it's over 300 because, see, we have more crab houses on Hooper's Island than any place in Maryland. So what they do, the watermen go out and crab, and what they do, they land their crabs to the crab houses, they bring them in and sell them, and then they steam them, and the migrant workers, it's mostly from Mexico, they come in, pick crabs.
Pink crabs.
Yeah, and some of the crab houses down at the lower island on Hoopersville pick 24 hours a day. They have 2 shifts. Or they'll do 3 shifts of 7 hours, 8 hours. That's what they'll do. But they'll pick 20, they've got so many crabs. Because the boats come down from Hoopersville and Hooper's Island, the buy boats for these crab houses, and they buy, one of the boats goes to Tangier, one goes to Smith, and they buy 600 to 700 bushel of crabs a day. See, the laws are different in Maryland than in Virginia. So what happens is the buy boats can go down to the Virginia waters, and it's a different crab limit than what it is for the Maryland crabbers.
So more in Virginia or less?
More.
More.
There's more restrictions in Maryland than in Virginia.
We'll pick them here.
That's right, exactly. But there is a restriction, I think even now, on the sponge crab, which is the female crab that's getting ready to lay the eggs. They don't bring them into Maryland anymore. I don't know if they even catch them in Virginia. See, they could catch them in Virginia, but they couldn't catch them in Maryland. But they could catch them in Virginia and ship them to Maryland. But I think a lot of that law has changed. So it makes it a little different. But there's just so many crab houses down on Hooper's Island that they get that crab meat picked. When that crab comes to that crab house, within 24 hours, those crabs are going up to Baltimore, New York, Pennsylvania. Go ahead,
Sure, go
Ron.
ahead, any questions?
So can you describe the 4 seasons on the island, like the work that's going on?
Okay.
I mean, we've touched on a lot, and I
Okay.
pieced together when what happens.
From November, we do muskrat in January, and oysters are in January, and fishing in January. And then when spring comes, it's the soft crabs and the crabs. But then my son does eels and turtles in the summer months. Crabbing ends December 31st in Maryland, but some people quit to go oystering in October. And then it's fishing all in between all of it. Fishing, the rockfish season just starts in June this year.
So when do you make your baskets? That sounds like a busy life.
It's busy. We're busy. We cut grass, we caretake, we clean homes of the houses we take care of. We cleaned a home Wednesday. Mom and I were
Yes, we
cleaning
did.
Wednesday. At night. Because Mom only sleeps 5 or 6 hours, and I probably only sleep 4 or 5 at the max. And that's 365 days a year. There's always something to do.
And there's always one of these set up in the kitchen.
They're there, yeah. Got them in the garage. I could always bring a piece of it in and a bucket of water and some reed and start weaving. But it's been really a fun thing, and I'm so glad that we did it because it's a tradition that's been lost for a while. And if we're from Hooper's Island, and if we can bring it back, that's what we want to do. That's our main goal.
Yeah,
Is to
and
keep
that's
it going.
Right, and that's been the purpose of the research project, is to be able to collect the stories and save them and keep things going. So even like with the Day Basket Factory, that was one of the areas that we studied, and that's the last remaining basket factory in Maryland. And it's been around since 1875, and
Cecil County?
yeah, it's Cecil
Cecil
County up
County.
in Northeast, and in the early 1900s, they were shipping thousands and thousands of baskets every month, that were filled with produce, tomato baskets, bean baskets, you name it, peach baskets, going all over the country from the agricultural stuff that was going on here and on the Eastern Shore, and the same with the baskets that were made, they're manufactured in Sharptown and Laurel and Chestertown. Those baskets also went all over the United States because they were close to railroads, and so they went out, and now you get your strawberries in plastic and your blueberries and your tomatoes and all this kind of stuff. It's just not the same, and so all those traditions are gone, and so even some of those, like with the eel pots, the fruit and vegetable baskets are also gone because they were really thought to be nothing, and they were thought to be cheaply made. But if you think about it, it was the only way to get the fruits and vegetables from the farm to the marketplace, and that was the way you did it. And before that, you did it in burlap bags, right? Or in bags. And the same thing with the eel pots. This was the only way to get the eels to the market, and the crab pots were the only ways to get the crabs to the market. And and people would go out in their boats and catch them, and then bring them in, and then they would be, processed and distributed and all that kind of stuff all over the United States in just the same kind of way. And now you just don't find that kind of craft anymore. You really don't. And
The Day Basket Company is having more difficulty as years goes by getting enough white oak for themselves to make their basket orders. They're actually running short. And if they, like he said, when you cut those trees, you never know how many's going to work. And they can't really sell the white oak to us. I did order enough to make 2 baskets, and it was $300 and some for the white oak for 2 baskets.
Yeah. Yeah, and so much of it, as Rhonda says, ends up in their fireplace. I mean, it just doesn't, you can't use it.
Yep.
And,
But Karen from the Day Basket Company, she said, we had to wait. They do spring and fall for the cutting of the trees. It has to be, the sap has to be a certain way before they can cut it. And she said, we had to actually put some of our baskets on hold we couldn't make them because we never had the white oak, we ran out. So we can't really sell to individuals if we're not going to have enough for our business.
Alrighty, so just to say a little bit more about eels, and that is that I did talk about them being endangered, and we have worked with the Department of Natural Resources in Annapolis. There's a whole group of eel biologists there, and so I've learned a lot from them, and they came to speak when we all were at the Captain Avery Museum over on
Yep.
south of Annapolis, and so we learned a lot about how the eels apparently are born in the Sargasso Bay, and then they make their way up into the tributaries of the eastern coast, and many of those tributaries are dammed like the Susquehanna is dammed, and so some states have made it possible to lift the eels up over the dams and get them to fresh water, which is where they grow to maturity. And in Maryland, the last I heard, and I think it was at Captain Avery, they are collecting them live and carrying them in trucks to the other side of the dam and then letting them go so that they can move on up into the tributaries in Pennsylvania to fresh water. And once they're mature and they've been there for a long time, then they can swim back. And then they swim back and they come over the dam, which is not a problem. And then they swim back to the Sargasso Bay, which is kind of off of the Carolina coasts. And then they mate and die. And that's their life cycle.
That's it.
And it's a very
That's it.
mysterious fish.
It is.
You know, and they don't know a lot about eels and how they do all of that and how they manage to find their way up the tributaries and all that. And there are a bunch of different kinds of eels also. And I can remember as a kid, on the Chesapeake Bay, seeing eels in the water and all this kind of stuff, and thinking we'd all run away because they thought we were electric eels.
That's right, that's right.
But they're really the American eel. Right?
Justin has caught a moray eel.
Has he caught a moray?
He's caught
Wow.
a moray. And he actually, because he catches thousands of pounds a week, and when we're actually dipping them out for the eel buyer, you'll see every now and then you'll see one that's a purple color. It's
Oh,
a different
my
color.
goodness.
And they will not live in captivity.
Uh-huh.
They'll die.
They'll die, yeah.
So we just throw them back out.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what kind they are. They're just a purple
I
color.
don't know what they are either, but it's usually the American
But-
eels that come up the tributaries. And eels actually are caught all over the world. And so the eel pots that are made here on the eastern shore may be very different in other countries. And so you'll see, I've seen photos of eel pots in England and in other Asian countries, and they're all very different. And so, but eels are caught all over the world, and they really are considered.
And Native
delicacies.
Americans
Yes.
made baskets that were very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They made it work. I mean, there was no pattern, no nothing, but
Right.
they caught them. I mean, they were able to, but it was out of reeds,
And they also used gigs, they
Yep.
speared them.
Yep. But I've got pictures in a book where they actually, in like the early 1800s, they were catching eels with
Right.
some type of basket that they had made out of reeds. So.
Okay, so thank you, Rhonda, thank
All right,
you,
you're
Nellie.
welcome. Thank you.
It's been,
It's good.
we've known each other for 5 years, and
Yep.
it's just been a delightful relationship, and
Yep.
so, I really, just admire and I just feel honored to have worked with them, because they really are working hard to preserve this craft. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.